You can be around people and still feel completely drained, not physically, but mentally, like something inside you has been used up. And the strange part? Nothing bad actually happened. And yet, the moment it's over, you feel completely exhausted. You talk, you listen, you smile, and everything seems completely normal. There's no obvious conflict, no tension, nothing that would explain why you should feel uncomfortable. And yet, the moment it's over, you feel completely drained. Not just a little tired, but deeply exhausted, like something inside you has been used up. And the strangest part is that you can't really explain why. If someone asked you what exactly made you feel this way, you probably wouldn't have a clear answer, because nothing bad happened. It was just a normal interaction, just being around people. And somehow, that alone was enough to leave you feeling empty. And if you think about it, that's what makes it so confusing. Because if something is clearly exhausting, you can understand it. If a situation is stressful, overwhelming, or uncomfortable, it makes sense that it would drain you. But this doesn't feel like that. It feels normal while it's happening, which makes the exhaustion afterward feel out of place, almost like your experience and your reaction don't match. And that disconnect makes it even harder to understand what's really going on. Because you're not reacting to what's happening on the surface, you're reacting to what's happening underneath it, to everything your mind is doing in the background, to everything you're carrying without realizing it. And that's why this kind of exhaustion feels so different. It's not loud, it's not obvious, but it's constant. And over time, it builds up in a way that becomes impossible to ignore. At first, you might try to explain it in simple ways. Maybe you tell yourself that you're just introverted, or that you simply need more alone time than others. Maybe you assume that this is normal and that everyone feels like this to some extent. But if you really pay attention, it doesn't feel like normal tiredness. It feels deeper than that. It feels like something inside you is constantly working, even when nothing important is happening. Because the truth is, it's not just about being around people. It's about what happens inside you while you're around them. There is a part of you that never fully relaxes, even when everything seems calm, even when the conversation is easy. There is still a subtle awareness in the background. You notice how you speak, how you react, how you come across. You think before you answer, you adjust your tone, you choose your words carefully, and at the same time, you're also paying attention to the other person. You notice their reactions, their expressions, the way they respond to what you say. So instead of just being present in the moment, you're constantly observing it. You're both inside the conversation and slightly outside of it at the same time. That's when something else starts to happen. Your mind doesn't just follow the conversation anymore. It starts running ahead of it, and you don't even notice it while it's happening. It just feels like you're being normal. And that's exactly why it's so exhausting. There is no clear moment where it stops, no switch that turns it off. Even when the conversation slows down, your mind often keeps going. You keep thinking about what was said. You keep analyzing what might happen next. You stay slightly ahead of the moment instead of fully inside it. And that creates a constant sense of tension. Not strong enough to be overwhelming, but always present. And that low-level tension, over time, drains far more energy than you expect. Because it's not about intensity, it's about duration. It's about how long your mind stays active without rest. And in social situations, for you, that can be almost the entire time. You think about what to say next while you're still speaking. You replay what you just said and analyze whether it sounded right. You adjust your behavior in real time, often without even realizing it. And even though each of these thoughts is small, together they create a constant mental load. This is where your energy goes, not into the conversation itself, but into managing it. You're not just talking, you're monitoring yourself. You're not just listening, you're analyzing. You're not just reacting, you're adjusting. And over time, this constant process becomes exhausting. What makes this even more difficult is that it happens automatically. You don't consciously decide to do it, it just happens. And because it feels natural, you don't question it. You don't realize how much energy it's costing you. You only feel the result afterward when everything is quiet again and you finally have space to notice how drained you feel. This usually doesn't start suddenly. It develops slowly over time. At some point, you may have had experiences where you felt misunderstood, out of place, or different from others. Maybe you noticed that certain parts of your personality didn't fit easily into social situations. And without even thinking about it, you started to adapt. You became more aware of how you act, more careful about what you say, more focused on how you are perceived. You learned what works and what doesn't. You learned how to avoid awkwardness, how to keep conversations smooth, how to respond in ways that feel socially acceptable. And little by little, you created a version of yourself that is easier for others to engage with. But that version comes at a cost, because maintaining it requires energy. And over time, you don't just feel tired, you feel like you're slowly giving parts of yourself away, little by little, conversation by conversation, until there's almost nothing left. Every time you adjust yourself, every time you filter your thoughts, every time you hold something back, you spend a little more of that energy. And the more often you do it, the more exhausting it becomes. That's why being alone feels so different. When you're alone, you don't have to think about how you come across. You don't have to adjust your behavior. You don't have to monitor your reactions. You can just exist without effort. And that feeling is not just comfort, it's relief. It's the absence of that constant mental activity. But then, after some time, something else happens. You start to miss connection. You want to talk again. You want to feel understood. You want to feel close to someone. So you go back into social situations, hoping it will feel different this time. And for a moment it does. You engage, you connect, you participate. But slowly the same pattern returns. The awareness, the adjustment, the monitoring, and eventually the exhaustion comes back as well. This creates a cycle that repeats over and over again. You connect, you get drained, you withdraw, you recover, and then you try again. Over time, this cycle starts to feel normal. You begin to expect that being around people will cost you energy. You expect conversations to feel like effort. You expect yourself to need recovery afterward. And because it happens so consistently, you start to believe that this is just who you are. But that's not actually true. And once you start believing that, something else happens. You stop questioning the pattern. You stop looking for where it comes from. And instead, you start adjusting your life around it. You become more selective with who you spend time with. You limit how long you stay in social situations. You choose environments that feel easier to manage. And while that helps in the short term, it doesn't solve the underlying issue, because the pattern itself is still there. It just gets triggered less often. And that's why, even in situations that should feel comfortable, the same exhaustion can still appear. Because it's not about the situation alone. It's about how you experience it internally. And that only changes when you start becoming aware of what's happening beneath the surface. What you're experiencing is not your personality, it's a pattern. It's something you've learned over time, something you've adapted to in order to navigate social situations more easily. And like anything that is learned, it can also be changed. The first step is to recognize where your energy is going, not just after the interaction, but during it. Notice when you start overthinking. Notice when you start adjusting yourself. Notice when you hold back or filter your thoughts. Because those are the moments where your energy is being used. And the more aware you become of this process, the more you can start to change it. Not all at once, but gradually. By allowing yourself to be a little more honest, a little less controlled, a little less focused on how you are being perceived. Because real connection doesn't require constant effort. It doesn't require you to monitor yourself all the time. It doesn't leave you feeling empty afterward. Real connection feels natural. It feels calm. It feels like you can just be yourself without thinking about it. And if you haven't experienced that often, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means you've been operating in a way that takes too much from you. And your exhaustion is not a weakness, it's a signal. a signal that something needs to change. Because if you keep ignoring that signal, the pattern will continue. You will keep giving your energy away without realizing it. You will keep feeling drained without understanding why. But once you start paying attention, once you start becoming aware of what is really happening inside you, something begins to shift. You start to reconnect with yourself. You start to notice what actually feels natural and what doesn't. You start to recognize when you are being real and when you are just adapting. And slowly you begin to change the way you experience interactions. It won't happen instantly, it won't be perfect, but it will start to feel different. Less forced, less exhausting, more real. And over time, that changes everything. Because the problem was never people. It was how much of yourself you had to give away to be around them. And once you stop doing that, something changes. Connection doesn't drain you anymore. It starts to feel real again. And if you've felt this for a long time, this isn't just random. There's a deeper reason behind it. Something most people never realize. And once you finally see it, everything starts to make sense.